The Oklahoma Sooners added a defensive tackle in the transfer portal. What does it mean for the Sooners in 2024?
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase over at Gametime. My name is John Williams. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. My buddy here is Josh Helmer. You can follow him on Twitter at JoshOnRef. The show is at Locked On Sooners. And Jermayne Lole is now an Oklahoma Sooner, the defensive tackle transfer from Louisville, a guy that's played a lot of college football and has a lot of talent, but injuries have kind of kept him from really having a contiguous career, if I can really say it that way.
It's a great get for Oklahoma. We'll see about Dominic Williams. Kind of feels like maybe that's not 100% headed Oklahoma's direction. Obviously, he's going to take some more visits, and I don't know. It feels like maybe some of the optimism has waned there a little bit. And obviously, Bleedy didn't make the spring game trip for Oklahoma. So you wanted to add somebody in the defensive interior, and Oklahoma's done that with Jermayne Lole, somebody that, again, has college experience and can come in and help Oklahoma out straight away. And I liked a lot of what I saw from Oklahoma on the interior in the spring game. Devon Sears is somebody that can sort of play a little bit everywhere for Oklahoma. I thought he did a good job on the edge on a couple of snaps, but he could bounce inside if need be for Oklahoma. Grayson Halton, I thought, was one of the best players in the spring game for Oklahoma. We've talked a lot about Jaden Jackson, so I think Oklahoma's in a pretty good spot in general with the defensive tackle. Dejon Terry obviously will help OU, but you'd always like one or two more faces if you can add them, and they found that in Lowell.
Well, and you think about how many games Oklahoma could potentially play, having added depth at places that there's a lot of wear and tear. It's a grind to play on the interior offensive line or defensive line because you're just getting hit every single time. And being able to have a rotation of guys that you can throw out there for 300-400 snaps in a given season is going to be huge. Again, Dejon Terry is a good player. He helped Oklahoma a lot last year, but also you didn't really have much in the way of nose tackle depth a year ago. And so when he was out of the game, it kind of dropped off. Well, now with Jermayne Lole, with Jaden Jackson, potentially with Dominic Williams, I'm still feeling pretty good about it with Williams, even though he's taking visits elsewhere. I'm still feeling pretty optimistic about where they're heading in that direction. But with Lole, I mean, you're talking about a dude as a sophomore at Arizona State had 71 total tackles at defensive tackle, 10 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks, and then just injury riddled the next 3 years. 2 of those at Arizona State, 1 of those at Louisville. Well, this last season had 19 total tackles, 5 sacks, and 1.5 sacks. So, still trying to work back into that form that, was pretty fantastic. But I do think that he comes in and he helps upgrade your depth at the very least and raises that talent ceiling for the entire defensive tackle room.
Gives you one more body to work with and somebody that has been around the block. You hope that you get a good bill of health and, get him in here to go through the summer program, which I'm sure is the expectation. Get on campus in the next couple of weeks, really, right? Semester's coming to a close, and then boom, get enrolled for those summer set of courses and get off and running, get Schmitty-ified for Oklahoma, and then get settled into what Oklahoma's doing defensively with Brent Venables, with Zach Alley, with Todd Bates, figure out sort of what the system looks like. I'm sure it's not totally different from what he's familiar with Louisville and Arizona State. The verbiage is only going to be so different from football program to football program. And yet, obviously, there could be some philosophical differences, some schematic differences. But being an older guy, probably less worried about some of that stuff. Here's somebody that's, again, played some college football, but Having said that, hey, the sooner you get them in, the better. And obviously you can get off and running throughout the summer into fall camp. Get to know the other guys. Doesn't hurt you either. I think, that's just another positive. But obviously we've spent plenty of time talking about the defensive line. You'd love to get one more defensive tackle. You'd love to get 2 defensive tackles, and we can get greedy out of the transfer portal. And maybe Oklahoma can continue to do that, but Lole's a nice start.
He is, and he's going to be a good player for you. I think you're right. You don't worry so much about whether he'll be able to transition. He's done the transfer thing before, so he kind of knows what to expect a little bit when transferring to Oklahoma. And, he's going to be a guy that can plug in. It's going to be interesting to see, do they see him as a nose tackle? He's got the size to do it. Or do they see him as like a 3 technique that's playing more between the guard and the tackle, more your Grayson Halton type? They're really working to get as many of those defensive tackles up over 300 pounds as possible. And at the spring game, Brent Venables mentioned that Jaden Jackson and David Stone each came in over 300. Grayson Halton is just about a nickel shy of 300 pounds. And then you add a guy like Jermayne Lole, and he's well over 300 pounds as well. So you've beefed up your interior under Brent Venables over the last 2 off seasons with Dejon Terry addition last off season. Now Jermayne Lole, the recruiting classes, the strength and conditioning and the nutrition programs that Oklahoma has, and it's all coming together, and you've got to have the size, you've got to have the bulk to be able to play on the interior for a full season against these SEC offensive lines that are going to be having some big dudes trying to create holes and open up things against your defense. So I like the addition. I think I'm willing to be greedy. I'm willing to have high expectations that Oklahoma can still pull out a Dominic Williams commitment at this point. Apparently there's some strong connections to the program. And according to George Stoy over at Sooner Scoop, the expectation was he was always going to take his visits. He wasn't going to come to Oklahoma and then shut it all down. He was still going to go on his recruitment, to Texas, make that visit. Now he did cancel one of his visits, so that's encouraging at least. So we'll see kind of where it all goes from here, because it's still a big time commitment or a big time recruitment, and everybody's going to be on this, and the Oklahoma Sooners and Todd Bates will continue to pursue Dominic Williams. But adding Lole as a start, just like the Branson Hickman addition to the offensive line, it's just a really, really solid addition that makes you better.
Well, if the dust does settle in 2 weeks' time, a month's time, whatever it would be, I guess it'd be quicker than a month's time, in the next several weeks, and Dominic Williams is along with Lole out of the transfer portal, and you've got what you already have in-house, then I think Oklahoma's in a really good defensive interior defensive line position, because, again, I thought Grayson Halton did some of the best things in the spring game. Jaden Jackson, again, was very impressive. I think David Stone is only going to continue to get better. Obviously, you got Dejon Terry to factor in, get him healthy, get him right. So I think Oklahoma's in a pretty good little spot right now. But if you tell me that you've added Lowell, obviously, and then you add Dominic Williams on top of that, okay, well, now you got something pretty positive.
Yeah, there's a lot to be excited about, a lot to be optimistic about, but we're going to ask the question, and we're looking forward to your responses over in the YouTube comments as well. Are we feeling better or worse about the Oklahoma Sooners after the spring game? We'll discuss that coming up next here on Locked On Sooners. It is NBA playoff time, NHL playoff time, and the best place to go for the last minute deals and the best prices is over at Gametime. Checking out that Gametime app right now. And for Pelicans at Thunder Game 2 in the Western Conference playoffs, tickets as low as $51 for an NBA playoff game. I don't know if you've seen the highlights, watched what was going on in the game, or watched the game itself, but I mean, the atmosphere was electric. If you want to be a part of that, go to Gametime right now. And I mean, the views of the court, you get to see that in the Gametime app that you can download in the Apple Store or the Google Play Store. It's fantastic with last minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals. It's easy to find and buy Major League Baseball, NBA, NHL tickets for all kinds of events in your area. views from all seats in the venue, the lowest price guaranteed, and event cancellation protection, job loss protection as well. Go check it out. They got zone deals. Save even more when you choose a section and let Gametime choose the seats. And Gametime provides great ticket coverage as well. With your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, create an account and use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Gametime app. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
It's playoff time in the NBA and in the NHL. Baseball, yes, it's in full swing. FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets. That's guaranteed. $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic W, an automatic win. That's with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And as we always like to share with you, that over-under win total, 7.5 for Oklahoma, 9.5 points that you're getting for Oklahoma versus Texas with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
The Locked On NFL Mock Draft is available now. Find the ultimate 6-episode series on Locked On NFL Draft to hear who the local Locked On experts are picking for every NFL franchise, with live reactions from local college football experts and even the fantasy football angle. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft available now on Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. So Josh, the question of the day: are you feeling better or are you feeling worse about the Oklahoma Sooners after the spring game? You can go in a multitude of directions with this. You can talk a position group. You can talk the team in general, get the big picture view. What's your first thought when I ask you that question?
I think big picture, not radically different, but forced to choose, I would say I do feel a little bit better about Oklahoma's prospects for 24. And part of that is who wasn't available, right? So thinking about, okay, you get a Nick Anderson back, you get a Jaleel Farouk back. We'll see when and what the timeline looks like for an Andrell Anthony, but you get perhaps an Andrell Anthony back even for a half of a season or that final third or quarter of a season if he's full speed in that stretch. That's exciting to think about with what we saw from Deion Burks, who I think showed that absolutely he has every possibility to be a star for Oklahoma offensively. The first team offensive line for Oklahoma was encouraging. That was better than expected, given some of what we had heard and some of what, some had seen out there. So offensively, those would be encouraging. I think that Franklin, after going back and watching the spring game again, I'm not convinced that he's not going to get a ton of carries for Oklahoma. I don't think that Gavin Sawchuk is just some slam dunk ahead of him. I don't think that Caleb Hicks is some slam dunk ahead of Franklin. So that's another way to say that I like what Oklahoma's got at running back. So offensively feel good. The one area, tight end, I thought was pretty disappointing for Oklahoma in the spring game. And given that last year was disappointing overall, that would be, I'm less encouraged there. Now it was one organized practice in front of 40,000 plus people. So I'm not going to get too high or too low, but if again, we can only go off of that, then okay. Wasn't super impressed based on what we saw from the tight ends collectively, defensively, again, with what you were missing and thinking about what we did see. I thought it was a really good day for Kenai Walker. He did some nice things in coverage on Jaden Gibson. Michael Boganowski, I think, has a chance to help Oklahoma quickly based on what we saw in the spring game. Across the board, defensive line, I liked a lot of what we saw there for OU. So I do think they're still trying to figure out, okay, what does it look like opposite Danny Stutzman? But we sort of knew that going in. So all of that, those would be some of the main takeaways from the spring game for me. Put all of that together. cocktail it up and, stew it around. And I think it's more positive than negative coming out of the spring game.
Yeah, that's kind of where I land as well. I think the offensive line was encouraging, and that's the area that everybody's going to be focusing on, even until we get to that first SEC game against Tennessee. I think all eyes are going to continue to be on the offensive line and how they perform. But I thought it was an encouraging sign to see what they'd done. We'd heard reports that guys like Jacob Sexton were playing really, really well. Fabechi Wiwu was playing really, really well in spring ball, and I thought they did play really good. I thought Josh Bates was good. I know they added the Branson Hickman edition, and he's a guy that's probably going to come in and start. But I think the spring game provided a bright look at what Josh Bates' future is. Even if it is, maybe it is 2024 still that he is the starter at center. But if not 2024, 2025, I think it's very reasonable to expect that he could be the starter there. Aside from Deion Burks, I thought the wide receiver group was just kind of okay. I'm looking forward to getting Nick Anderson back and Jalil Farouk back and Angelo Anthony back to add to that depth. But ultimately I thought, hey, it was all right. I was encouraged by Sam Franklin. That was a dude that we didn't really know how he was going to factor in with Gavin Sawchuk, Javonte Barnes, and Xavier Robinson and Caleb Hicks, and then the incoming Taylor Tatum. But dude, he showed out. There was one stretch where they gave him 3 straight carries, and I think he picked up like 10 yards a carry on each of those opportunities that he had. And so it's an encouraging opportunity to see that, okay, a guy like Sam Franklin making the jump from the FCS level to big time college football is ready to go, and he's ready to put in the work. I think this is a team that's continuing to develop a lot of talent, and there's a lot of growth that still needs to happen. The thing that was encouraging to me the most was that there was give and take on both sides. The offense had a stretch where they had all the momentum, and it looked like, hey, if this was a real game, they were just going to run away with everything. But then the defense just battled. They battled back, and they made things really, really difficult on the offense, forced some 3 and outs, started getting some sacks, creating some pressure, clogging up some run lanes, and grabbed momentum for themselves. And it just went back and forth like that, where there was momentum shifts throughout the entire spring game, creating a little bit of drama for the end of it, where Brennan Zurbrugg and Chapman McCown led the way for a Oklahoma Sooners win. So, just a really encouraging afternoon in April for the Sooners. I thought, being that you're not going to get all the answers because you don't have a Billy Bowman out there, you don't have Dejon Terry and Woody Washington out there, that you're limited in what you're going to get defensively. I thought the defense was pretty good. And so it's encouraging that, hey, you're going to add those guys back to it. Now you're adding a Jermayne Lole, and maybe you're adding a Dominic Williams, and that just continues to add to the talent that you have on the defensive side of the ball.
The quarterbacks, I thought some really good from both Jackson Arnold and Mike Hawkins. In particular, the first series, directing the drive for the score for Michael Hawkins was good. Mm-hmm. I do think that as the day went on, that second team offensive line unit, Howland, Ozida, Isosa, Brooks, Brown, they obviously going up against the ones defensively had a tougher assignment, and Hawkins didn't have as much time to operate as Jackson Arnold did. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the second half of the spring game, Hawkins got a couple of series with the ones offensively. I think that he went out there and got to go with the number one offensive line for a little bit, but it almost felt like to me watching it that his second, third, fourth series with the twos, kind of that maybe he got a little rattled. And I don't think that he ever got settled back in from the first series on. Now, I love the athleticism. He's got some big-time athleticism about him, the way that he moves. I can see him being a star quarterback in the future, but I do think based off what I saw from the spring game that, to me, pretty clearly, and now part of it could be that Arnold got the exclusivity with the ones on the offensive line. But to me, it looked like Jackson Arnold was clearly the number one quarterback, though he has, I think, a good fair bit to clean up as well. The timing with a number of receivers wasn't as crisp as you would like it to be. A couple of passes to Deion Burks statistically makes it look really good, but it could have been throughout directed better for Oklahoma too. So he's got, I think, some definite growth still to make between now and the time that they kick this off. But he was good too. There was some good there too. So quarterbacks were not top to bottom a wow factor for me. There was some really good, but I would not describe it as great.
Yeah, there was a lot of really, really good. There were some great moments, and then there were some moments that we were like, almost. Yeah, almost hit it. It was right there, but it's going to get better. I'm pretty confident that Jackson Arnold is going to continue to improve and develop over the offseason. And when the 2024 season rolls around, he's going to be on fire and ready to roll. Michael Hawkins kind of got the Jackson Arnold treatment from the 2023 spring game. I mean, Jackson Arnold did not look great in the 2023 spring game until that final drive when they let him play behind the first team offensive line, and then he directed a touchdown drive and hit Gavin Freeman on a post for a touchdown. So I'm not too worried about Michael Hawkins. You know, the guy's made up of all the right stuff, and he's got all the right talent to go and be very, very successful at the collegiate level. Coming up next, we got more recruiting predictions from a big recruiting weekend in Norman. I've been told I'm a competitive person. Josh, do you think that might be true?
I think that's fair to say.
I mean, I am. You know, youth soccer, doesn't matter. U4, I want to see my kids do well, perform well. I'm not out there, getting all, Bob Knight on everybody, but I want to see them all succeed and have fun and do the very, very best they can. I definitely got that competitive side. We all do. And my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part is messing with my friends. I can charge them rent on my iconic properties, just like classic Monopoly, but now I can also heist their vaults of riches for myself, and the leaderboards show me who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. But it's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with friends and people all around the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play Store. So over a big recruiting weekend, it's no surprise that the Oklahoma Sooners received a number of predictions for 2025 prospects. We'll start with Courtland Guillory, the big-time cornerback prospect out of Texas, the Sooners received 4 predictions, a couple from OU insiders, Parker Thune and Brandon Drum, and then from 247 Sports, Colin Kennedy, as well as another 247 Sports Texas recruiting insider, all predicting Guillory to land with the Oklahoma Sooners. Now, I spent some time watching his film last night while writing a story for Sooners Wire, and dude, this guy would be a fan favorite at Oklahoma. Just the way that he plays the cornerback position, he plays it like a safety. I mean, he's physical, laying the lumber. I mean, he's dropping dudes with shoulders, and I mean, he's hitting hard. I like the way he plays in coverage. He plays with a lot of speed, but shows the ability to play in phase and keep his eyes back to the quarterback and make good timing competitive decisions when he's going after the football in the air. So I really, really like what Oklahoma is recruiting in Guillory. Now, will they be able to land it? Sounds like all the momentum is heading in Oklahoma's favor, but this is a guy who's a blue chip prospect according to the composite rankings at On3 and 247 Sports. So a lot to like about him, and has a number of really, really nice offers on his offer sheet.
Yeah, would be a big time get for Jay Valai and Oklahoma to go along with Malik Hawkins in this class, and probably one of the other guys listed as an athlete could be considered a corner too. But I think that's the lone corner, right, is Hawkins in the class so far. But Guillory, again, good size, 6'1", 170. And I like your assessment of him, obviously, is positive. These body types like that, those types of athletes, feels like Oklahoma's done a really good job of stacking those types of players up recently. So hats off to Valai if he can ultimately pull off this commitment. That many Oklahoma insiders tossing call it a crystal ball, a future cast, whatever you want. That many folks tossing predictions out is probably a pretty good sign of at least where this recruitment stands today. Now, can a recruitment change? Obviously, a recruitment can change, but it sounds like today that, I'm going to assume that a commitment is borderline imminent.
It would seem so. Just to highlight a few of his offers, obviously Oklahoma, Texas, Missouri, Tennessee, Texas A&M, Pitt, to name a few. Also got that Kansas offer, which, hey, that Kansas offer means a lot more in 2024 than it did just 4 or 5 years ago with Lance Leipold at the helm. So let's not poo-poo the Kansas offer at all. Another 2025 prospect that received a prediction favoring the Sooners, Antoni Ogumoro, the Elgin native offensive lineman. The dude, he might be my favorite player in this class. I always try to find one player that is kind of the 3-star to 4-star borderline that might be one of my favorite players, and this guy might be my favorite. I don't know if you've seen some of his basketball highlights, but a guy that's 6'5" and basically 300 pounds shouldn't be able to move quite like he's able. He reminds me a lot of like big baby Ben Davis from those old LSU days. Just a guy that just has great size to play offensive tackle, moves really, 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 really well on the basketball court, and that's going to translate really, really well to offensive line. The way he plays offensive line, very, very physical guy. He has a ton of athleticism, moves well in space. He plays tackle for Elgin, probably projects maybe as an interior offensive lineman at the collegiate level. But, I mean, I like everything about this kid's game. He's only been playing offensive line for a short time, but has made the transition really, really well. And he's a guy that I think could be a fast riser over the rest of the 2025 recruiting cycle.
Did you say pulling guard on a counter? That's what I heard. Obviously, with that type of athleticism, you can do some fun things within the offensive line scheme. So if he's an interior offensive line that moves that well, then again, that opens up some interesting run concepts potentially for you. So exciting. I love, in-state guys getting love from Oklahoma and potentially winding up at Oklahoma because they get what it means to play for Oklahoma. So exciting to see another offensive lineman on the board, potentially.
Yeah, it's just a fascinating story, because anybody that hadn't played football, for most of their life, or, he hadn't really played a ton of football, but started playing in high school, and they, had him on the defensive line for a short time and then transitioned him last year as a junior to offensive tackle. And it just looks like he really took to offensive tackle really, really well. And he's just got that natural ability, and it's a similar story that reminds me of like Tyler Guyton, right? Now, I'm not going to sit here and say Antoni Ogumoro is going to be on this first round NFL draft projection down the road. I think it's very possible because he's got the movement skills that NFL teams just covet. But it's a similar pathway, right? A guy that spent time at a different position other than offensive line. Tyler Guyton was a defensive line and then an H-back tight end, and then he was an offensive tackle at TCU and then transferred to Oklahoma and really thrived under Bill Bedenbaugh. I think Antoni Ogumoro could very well do the same thing with the Sooners. So very exciting that Oklahoma is trending in a very positive direction with these guys. And again, when they host over or close to 100 recruits for a weekend, you're bound to move the needle, and the Sooners have done so in a big, big way. Obviously, they got the commitment from 2027 prospect Zane Rowe out of Denton Guyer, got the Branson Hickman commitment out of the transfer portal, the SMU center, obviously Jermayne Lole. Golly, I'm just blanking on everybody's names tonight. Struggle bussing. Jermayne Lole, that commitment as well. So a big, big momentum push for the Sooners this past weekend.
Yeah, you expect that when you have the spring game, and Oklahoma's obviously seeing the fruits of their labors on the recruiting trail and the results of putting on another show at the annual spring game. And let's hope that this is one of many.
That's right. And the way Brent Venables runs the spring game, probably will be. It's always an event. And that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in, being a part of the show. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. Follow Josh on Twitter at JoshOnRef, myself at John9Williams. The show is at Locked On Sooners. But until next time, he's Josh. I'm John. Boomer Sooner.